Hello and welcome to an all new episode of the Up the Coast podcast. As always, I am your host, Tyler. I got two very special guests here today. In the second half of the show, I'm going to talk to Jack Grossman of the Floyd Street's Finest podcast. We're going to go deep into all things Louisville. But before this, you know him from the ACC Network podcast. You know him from the Basket Under Review show with the king of Bubble Watch, Eamon Brennan. He is the great Tate Frazier. Tate, am I missing anything here?
I mean, the ringer, I'm still at the ringer tailgate. It's all the shows change over time, but what I like to talk about will never change, and that's college basketball. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to talk about everything because we're almost there, a few more days, and then we enter March, the best time of the year.
Yeah, it is right upon us. By the time everyone's listening to it, it'll be about a day away. But I got a half dozen questions for you here. Some of them pertain to the ACC, some of them pertain to college basketball at large. Most of them are intertwining, and I want to kick things off. This timing of us recording could not be better because I just listened to a fantastic episode of the Bill Simmons podcast in which you were on there talking about the top three prospects going into this NBA draft. And you know what? It was a wonderful hour. I was so happy I got to listen to it. But the great Bill Simmons never asked you the number one most important question of this, which is Tate Frazier, who is your number one NBA prospect at this moment?
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to see all these guys in person, and I will give a little hat tip to Caleb Wilson. He's played all three of these guys, and I think he's outplayed all three of them. But again, he seemingly is not in that conversation. I do feel like that's good for Caleb to kind of have. He seems to be better with a chip on his shoulder. It was the same way that he was, throughout his whole kind of summer run. Right, everybody's talking about these three guys and not Caleb, and I think he seems to be better in that spot, kind of as the underdog, I would say, of that group. I am someone who has just kind of been in awe of what I've seen from Darren Peterson. I understand all the drama. I understand all of the outside noise that has come into play. And I also understand some of the question marks about, what's going on with, his situation at Kansas. I think he's going to change that narrative over the next month. And I think he's going to have a really good March. I'm going to knock on wood as I say that because you don't want to you don't want to curse him or jinx him or anything like that. But for me, I just feel like Darren Peterson is the guy that being able to watch him play on the ball in the pick and roll, make decisions out of there, and also play off the ball. He's been able to do that at Kansas. He's kind of played a different position at Kansas, right, with Melvin Council being their point guard. So I think he's shown some versatility, and you kind of learn from the players who they assume is the top guy. To me, it kind of feels like they all defer to either AJ or Darren. I think it's a 1A, 1B situation. I think Boozer, depending on the team that gets the number one pick, I mean, there's no shame in taking someone who's that consistent, steady, and honestly just incredible to watch and so fundamentally sound. But for me, I'm a Darren Peterson guy, so I would take Peterson number one.
See, it's kind of tricky for him, and I'm in what is apparently the now growing camp of people who have become really concerned. And if he goes through March playing 32 minutes of game in the Big 12 tournament into the NCAA tournament, or if even Bill Self comes out and is just like, "Hey guys, Darren's just had a bum hamstring all year and he's had to fight through it," I'd feel so much better. But given that he's not going up against like Zachary Richechet of 2 years ago for the number one pick, where he would have just waltzed in, like AJ DeBanza seems like 20 a game as a rookie, even if his other skills don't develop in the NBA. And that just, I always kind of trend towards the guy with the rock solid floor. Like there's just
Mm-hmm.
no chance AJ DeBanza's not a quality starter in the NBA and might be much, much more. Whereas Darren Peterson could just be out of the league in like 3 years.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where like the position that AJ plays, I feel like is the most valued position too, right? When you talk about a wing who can slide down to the four if you need to, right? The Jason Tatum type player, Pascal Siakam, all those sort of guys, right? He kind of fits perfectly into that role. Guards are a little bit trickier to decipher. Obviously, Boozer, you're trying to figure out what he's going to be as far as an undersized four, or they can slide him down, and he's physically strong enough to body with some of the other bigs in the NBA. But I feel like that's the reason why AJ almost feels like a safer choice at this point, because when everyone's looking for those types of elite wings, AJ checks all the boxes. And you talk about a guy that wants to be the number one pick. AJ definitely wants to be the number one pick and can handle the marketing of all that sort of situation, which I talked about with Bill a little bit. So I'm with you. I mean, I don't think there's a wrong pick of those three guys. And honestly, if some team fell in love with Caleb Wilson and wanted to take him number one, now that would never happen, but I wouldn't begrudge them either because once you talk to this kid, you sort of fall in love. So any of those top four teams is going to be happy. I would say it's top five teams because I think, if you get a Kingston Flemings or, an Acuff, any of those guys there at number five, I like them as well. So it's just a really deep class. I love watching these freshmen play. And, there's also some guys that are going to end up in the late lottery, mid first round, late first round conversation that are some really, really good players. So it's just a really good draft all around.
Yeah, it just kind of, I was going to say it kind of sucks for Caleb Wilson, but it does seem like he takes it upon himself that if he is the number four pick, he's just going to be hell bent on beating all three of those guys for the next 10 years. But
Yes.
in a bad draft, he's a runaway number one level talent. So just kind of a weird year. But I do want to go into North Carolina here specifically. You, of course, a Tar Heels expert. Caleb Wilson dealing with the fractured hand, he is insistent that he is going to come back and play against Duke. Uh, us not being medical doctors, I'm a bit skeptical of that. And so I am wondering if Caleb Wilson can't get back, or even if he is severely limited, how far do you think this North Carolina team can go in the
Yeah, I
NCAA
think
tournament?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think right now, without Caleb, you're talking around, second round, Sweet 16 type ceiling. If they got to the second weekend, that would be a nice, feather in the cap for Hubert Davis as far as, his coaching acumen to be able to get this team over the hump. I like what Jaron Stevenson has been able to do in his stead. I really have been impressed with Seth Trimble at home, not so much on the road. So that's a little bit of volatility that you can't really rely on. Henry Vasar, I mean, you talk about a late first round guy that's going to be, I think, a really nice piece, especially the shooting aspect of what Vasar has been able to bring. He's got to get a little bit bulkier, a little bit bigger to play the five at the next level. But really like what he's been able to do as well. The backcourt is the question with his team. Dixon has been up and down. Kyan Evans, obviously, they didn't really hit on that in the transfer portal, but he's been a nice, sixth, seventh man coming off the bench for this team. I really like Jonathan Powell, who's also been a nice defender for this group. But when Caleb comes back, I had Luke Hancock on the show, and Luke had the exact same injury as Caleb in his left arm as well, his offhand, and he was like, I missed 2 games. Coach Pitino was kind of like, hey, I need you to play. They wrapped up the arm, and he was like, it was fine. And the other thing with Caleb, his hands are so big, he doesn't need 2 hands to grab the basketball. So the fact that he can use that left arm and sort of be strategic about how much body contact he takes on that left arm, I think is something to keep an eye on. And, talking to Rich, his agent, it just seems like Caleb wants to come back. They're okay to give him the green light to come back. I don't know if it'll be the Duke game that he comes back. I wouldn't be shocked if they just save it for the ACC tournament. But if he decides to come back for the Duke game, that would be electric because he and Cam Boozer have quite the rivalry. They play with each other in EYBL. They have a nice little friendly rapport and rivalry with each other. But the ceiling with Caleb is like an Indianapolis Final Four ceiling. Without him, you're talking at best probably a Sweet 16 type team.
Yeah, we also have had the Jaden High emergence here in the last couple of weeks. I'm finally getting to cash in on some of the stock. I've been holding on that one, but the key to me is Jaron Stevenson, who now just seems to once a month remind us how important he really is to this North Carolina team. And I'm looking at the bracketology of record, the Lenardi right here. North Carolina is a 6 seed, playing either TCU or New Mexico round one. The way those two guys are playing in Wilson's absence seems like they could easily win that game without him. But then Florida round two. And that feels like the difference between kind of a bummer end to the season without Wilson versus having Wilson, and that could be the game of the weekend.
Yeah, if it's Florida, North Carolina, I would take Florida. that would be my pick there for sure. But the front court of Florida is the best in the country. If arguably, and you could go with Michigan, Duke, Koa Pete if he returns for Arizona, they could be in that conversation as well. But again, you know how it is with the tournament. It's always matchups with these teams. I think Lenardi is, one of the worst bracketologists there is out there. So, I never trust what he's got going on. So, I think Carolina's closer to a 4 line than they are a 6 line. I think they'd probably, maybe we meet in the middle and say they're a 5 seed right now. I think Virginia's closer to a lock for a 3, and they could bump up to a 2 if they win at Cameron on Saturday. So in general, I know Lenardi gets clicks because he likes to troll the ACC, so that's part of his whole gamut. So you give him a tip of the cap for getting the reactions that he wants. But I think a lot of those teams in the ACC are a little bit underseeded at this point, and I think Carolina, if they can handle business down the stretch, Virginia Tech, Clemson, who knows what they could do in Cameron, they could really move themselves into a better situation where they don't have to face a team of that caliber in the second round.
Well, and the Lenardi bracket holds one very great value, which is, for example, let's say you're in the middle of hosting a podcast and need to figure out some hypothetical matchups, is a very, very easy Google find.
Of course,
So
yeah, he's got the SEO figured out. You know how it goes, Tyler.
So we do have that huge Duke Virginia showdown coming up on Saturday. And one of my favorite questions just to ask anyone who comes on here who has just a much better pulse on the national college basketball scene than I do. Where is Duke in this national title hierarchy? They're sitting at number one in the AP poll, but do they deserve to be the favorite right now?
I think so. I mean, maybe Michigan, right? I think it's a 1A, 1B situation. I think to me, the 3 teams that you would point to, and maybe you throw Florida in the mix, you could say 4 teams. I think that's their own tier as far as tier 1 teams in the country. Florida's backcourt, I'm still a little bit skittish on. I don't quite want to buy into a team that has such volatile guard play. Like that's the one concern with Florida. Arizona, I love Braden Burries. I love Jaden Bradley. I think that gives them quite an edge. And again, if Koa Pete comes back and is healthy, I think that gives Arizona a chance to go win a national championship. Elliot Cadeau at times can have his own volatility with Michigan, as we saw against Duke. So that's a bit of a concern. And then Duke, I mean, when Isaiah Evans and Caleb Foster are contributing and shooting the ball well, this is a team that you really have to watch out for. And Duke's front court is just immaculate. And what Cam Boozer has been able to do, I think Caden Boozer has been a nice piece for them as well as far as initiating offense. He's been a nice ball handling, piece to throw out there for them, kind of in situations where he and Boozer they have just a sense of where each other they played with each other so much, right? He kind of knows where his brother wants the ball. They have a little twin connection there that goes on, and I think that's a nice piece as well. And Gungba and Boozer and Malik Brown, I mean, those 3 guys are just 3 big bodies with size and length that you really, really have to deal with. And there aren't many teams in the country that can match up against Duke. So I think it's very fair to have Duke as the favorite. I think Cam Boozer has won at every single level. He continues to win at Duke this year. And if you look at their 2 losses, right, Texas Tech and North Carolina, those were 2 games that they kind of had in the bag that they were able to let slip away. And that's the only reason and the only cause for concern. But again, losses are lessons during the regular season. And I do feel like those 2 losses have taught Duke something that they can't rest on their laurels. So I think the Blue Devils are very fair to be the favorite right now.
Yeah, and they've just seemed to get contributions from those inconsistent role guys in the biggest moments. Like,
Mm-hmm.
think about Dame Sar shutting down Ryan Conwell the second half of that first Louisville game, the one that Louisville was winning at the half, and then him hitting all of those big shots in the North Carolina game that probably should have won it for them had they not fallen apart later. Caleb Foster going back to that same first Louisville game, having the best offensive performance of his career. And one of the things I'm still looking out for is it feels like they have not unleashed Malik Brown to his kind of full potential, and that we're going to get into like an Elite Eight game and they're going to be looking at some stud forward, trying to think of who the right guy would be because like they're not going to play BYU that late in the tournament, but just throw Malik Brown on some kind of awkward off position guy and just say, hey, it's your time to take him out.
Yeah, like a Thomas Houck with Florida,
Exactly. Yeah, that's a
like
great
like
one.
like someone like that, where it's just like he's their best player. Malik Brown, you handle business, and Malik Brown, I mean, by all intents and purposes, did an incredible job defending Caleb Wilson. Caleb Wilson just made some incredible shots and kept Carolina in the game in the first half, and then they were able to strike late in that one. But yeah, Malik Brown is a defensive weapon, and he attacks on defense. And I think having someone like that can shoulder some of the brunt of the defensive, prowess of the defense, give Boozer a little bit of time to rest on the other end and do what he needs to do on the offensive end. It's just a nice cheat code. And John Shire, I think he should. I mean, Ryan Odom, I think, will win ACC Coach of the Year, but I think it's a little bit ridiculous that John Shire hasn't gotten the credit. I know he has a machine there, but he should be more in the conversation for what he's been able to do with this team.
Yeah, I mean, Coach of the Year is always weird because it probably should just go to the coach of the best team every season, but it is a storyline award.
For sure.
A quick sub question for you, because one of the things that I had to laugh about coming, I think it was coming out of Duke, North Carolina. It might have been the lead up to it. They stuck you with fellow North Carolina guy Joel Berry on the ACC Network basketball podcast. Did you guys take any flack from Duke fans? Because that felt like a little too much Carolina for that week of the year.
Yeah, we brought on Ninth Wonder, who is a famous producer, and Ninth Wonder is like teaches at Duke and is a huge Duke fan. So we brought Ninth on to give a little bit of some Duke representation, and Ninth had a good time kind of prodding us and poking us a little bit. But again, I think the best part of that rivalry, and a lot of people kind of turn their nose up to it. It's like a cool thing now to be like, oh, of course, this rivalry game gets all this credit and all sort of stuff. It is a pure hatred between both, but there is a level of respect that is there as well. And I can watch Duke play, and they've kind of been a nice counterbalance with Carolina throughout time, where you can kind of see where you are as far as competing for a national championship on both sides depending on the year. And Duke is obviously the class of college basketball right now, so for North Carolina, it's a nice team to look at last game of the regular season to see where you really are. And like I said, you can only tip your cap to good basketball. Both fan bases know and love the game so much that it's a lot of fun to have the banner back and forth. Now sometimes it can go a bit too far, as we've seen from both sides throughout history. But that's the beauty of a rivalry. So it was nice of us to have Ninth on. Ninth again got to get out of his pot shots and do the best he could to go after Joel and I, and we accepted it because we were enjoying the spoils of a win on Saturday. So it's always fun.
Yeah, and as someone who did not grow up in North Carolina like you did, like there are times, and especially think about some of the down years UNC's had like last season, where it is a little bit in your face and annoying, like, God, how much more Duke Carolina are we gonna have to hear about? Like the Red Sox Yankees thing too. But then this year, the lead up to that first game, where they're both clearly elite teams, wanting to see Boozer against Wilson and knowing exactly where on the calendar, what day, what time that game is going to come, it does feel like there is a weight that nothing else in college basketball can match.
Yeah, it's a beautiful rivalry, and I take it past college basketball sometimes. I think it's one of the best rivalries in sports, and you go down 15-501, both those schools are right near each other, and there's a lot of history and a lot of back and forth. And like you said, just growing up in North Carolina, after that game, you go to school, whatever team wins, they're wearing all the colors, and there's just it's a healthy back and forth, and it's a lot of fun to be a part of. And I love Tobacco Road. NC State, obviously, it's nice to see them back in the mix a little bit too. Will Wade giving them a little bit of juice. They enjoyed beating Carolina without Vasar and Caleb Wilson. I think they won a national championship when they won that game. So, it's nice for the area to have that sort of response. And you love when the national pundits get involved too.
Yeah, so that NC State game was kind of perfect for everyone involved because Will Wade's been talking trash since the moment he got there. It felt like NC State fans really needed that win, but North
Hmm.
Carolina fans get to turn around and say, "Hey, we didn't have our two best guys. Like this really wasn't even a real matchup here." But maybe we'll see it again in the ACC tournament. The
We
seeding's
need it.
so in flux,
I need
who
I need
knows?
to see it in the ACC tournament. I think that's a win for everybody. And I'm like you said, I'm happy that Will Wade is at NC State. I think it's a good thing for the ACC and a good thing for NC State for sure.
So the other former VCU coach who has his team at the top of the league, Virginia. This is a kind of a niche one here for you. I'm not talking about best front courts. They obviously can't match the Floridas or the North Carolinas or the Dukes of the world. But is there a more physically intimidating front court in the country than Virginia's? Between the two great shot blockers and Testa Ritter, those just that seems like just an awful 40 minutes for the opposing team.
Yeah, Onyenzo, Grunlow, and DeRitter, those three guys, you talk about what Virginia does well. They defend well, especially at the rim. And you said their block percentage is one of the best in the country. They are able to get steals. They're able to get out in transition. They can speed games up if they need to. They can slow it down if they need to. They kind of have every single kind of box checked on this team. I really like Chance Mallory, another, small guard in the Virginia lineage that has been able to find his footing there, a local kid that wanted to go play in Charlottesville for Ryan Odom. I really like this team. I feel like Virginia is one of the most under the radar title contenders that we're not really talking about very much, especially if you look at Kim Pom, 24th in offensive rating, 16th in defensive rating. And they got a real test on Saturday. I would lean heavily on Duke in that game, but I've been surprised by many things in college basketball. So I'm hoping that Virginia shows up in that game and kind of shows everybody why they're one of those teams you got to watch out for. I mean, Lewis has been great. Jakari White's been a nice piece for them to kind of swing games. And, the depth of this team, the coaching by Odom, they're just going to be a really tough out in March. So I'm a big fan of this Virginia team.
Yeah, I do wish that game was at JPJ. Kind of feel a little bit like the Clemson Duke game last year where Virginia needs this to have a shot at the ACC title. It probably does mean a tiny bit more to them than Duke, but going out and winning in Cameron's going to be tough regardless. But
You got to win by 15 to win by 5 in Cameron, if that
yeah.
makes sense. You know what I mean? So like that's the tough part, and I do feel like Duke is going to be licking their chops for that. To send another message to the rest of the country when they get Virginia in the building. The talent is obviously all on Duke's side in that game, but you can't doubt this Virginia team. They've shown who they can be. 25-3 again. Just some games that are a little bit of head scratchers. They had Carolina dead to rights. Carolina came back in JPJ and got a win there, which was a nice win for North Carolina, but a really good group. And that Miami game to me was a great example of like why you can't count out Virginia. The old Virginia, if they got down like that, you're kind of like, oh man, this game's over. But this new version with Ryan Odom, they can find a way to claw back into a game. And, that's a lot of fun to see.
So this next tier of ACC teams, once we get past the Dukes and the Virginias and the North Carolinas, a lot of inconsistency and a lot of game-changing stars. So if I give you the group to pick one out of Ryan Conwell, Mikel Brown Jr., Darion Williams, Kadir Copeland, Malik Renew, Trey Donaldson, or Boopy Miller, which one of those seven are you betting on to have the best chance to become a March legend this year?
Ah, man, that's a good question. I have a soft spot for Louisville, but the variance of Louisville is just it's hard to really buy in because you see the best version of Louisville and you're like, man, this team could win the title. Then they go cold and you're like, where do they get offense from, right? And I think that's the frustrating part of that team. I think Quadir Copeland, what he's been able to do at NC State is kind of like a point forward, has been really spectacular. He has some experience, obviously, with McNeese State in the tournament, got a win last year, which was nice. So I guess if I had to pick one, I would go with Copeland. I just like kind of the dog in him, and I like the fight that he has. So I like Renew. I like Donaldson. Those are two guys that are really fun. I just feel like Jay Lucas and that Miami team, they're a good group. I don't know if they can really make a run to the Final Four, but if you told me that NC State ends up a second weekend team fighting for a chance to go to Indianapolis, I wouldn't be shocked by that. So I'll go with Copeland.
See and that to me, I feel like if you just threw all these guys out to kind of casual college basketball fans, I think he's the seventh pick out of seven
Hmm.
because people just haven't watched him and you see that low scoring number. But God, when he is on, he can easily control the 40 minutes of a game in a way that really only kind of Mikel Brown Jr. when he's red hot can of anyone in this group.
Yeah, I think those are my top two guys. It was Brown or Copeland, and I think that's Brown is one of those guys who can just absolutely just go on a scoring run that is unmatched in the country, unparalleled. He's going to be a top pick in the draft. Might end up being the fifth pick in the draft if all things break his way in March. But Copeland having the shooting around him with McNeil, Darian Williams, obviously, as well. I love Matt Abel, a freshman coming off the bench for this team. So, I mean, they have some nice pieces around Copeland. And then you got Vin Allen Lubin around the basket when you need it. So, I just think Copeland, for whatever reason, the steadiness, I know sometimes he can have his own volatility with his frustration and fouling and things like that. But he definitely sets the tone. And in the tournament, you need somebody to be a tone setter. And he checks that box.
Yeah, and we almost could have thrown in Justin Pippen after his career night to beat SMU. California basketball might make the tournament as a representative of the ACC was not a sentence I expected to say this season.
Yeah, man. Day Ames, Justin Pippen, like you said, they're a fun team. I love Coach Madsen. He's just a great personality. Great to have him in the conference doing good things. I thought Stanford before, Abuka Corey's been great for Stanford, but when they lost Akpara,
Yeah.
I felt like they kind of took a step back, and then California got the win over them, and then they started cruising a little bit. So yeah, Cal, I would love to see them in the tournament. I think Virginia Tech and Cal are kind of the two teams that are the bubble teams that are trying to fight, to get over the hump there. Yeah, I mean, they're just a really good group. They kind of have all the pieces that you need to, maybe get a win in March. And I think that would just be nice for Cal because, Cal's had some great basketball players. I go back to like Jason Kidd, in that era of Cal basketball. It's been quite some time since we saw that. So I would love for, to see a Pippen do well, in March. That'd be fun.
All right, last thing for you here. I want you to pick the perfect Final Four here. Not necessarily what you want to see happen, but just what would be the best for college basketball. So I'll give you an example. Mine, I'm going with Purdue just to have those 4 year guys between Kaufman, Wren, and Smith and Lawyer, and a reminder that you can still have this kind of vestige to the old days of these great older players who've been with Matt Painter forever. I'll go Duke again just for the thrill of having Cam Boozer in the Final Four. I guess you could sub in Kansas as well if Peterson is playing at that point. I'm going St. Louis because we need a Cinderella badly. Like
Hmm.
we just can't have the redo of last year where it's all the power conference teams and then we're going to keep hearing about, oh well, they can just break away. I think St. Mary's would also work for that as well. And then the last one, I'm just going with Michigan because they're just good and they're fun, and Dusty May's becoming a star.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you're checking all the boxes there. As far as just like matchups, I would love to see Duke, Michigan again. So I would take those two teams. I'll throw them in the mix. I would love to see Arizona finally make a run to the Final Four. This is just a program that's just been, the Sean Miller era. It was always a joke, right? They can, they could be the bridesmaid, but never the bride, right? And they could never finally get to the Final Four. So I would love to see those three teams. I know those are all top teams that would get there. You said we don't want all four power conference teams. I'm going to break the trend here and bucket a little bit. I'm going to go with Kansas. It's the Bill Self saga to end up in the Final Four with Peterson and to have the matchups like that, where it's like an Arizona, Kansas, a Duke, Michigan, and then we figure out who the best team in the country is. I think that would be a whole lot of fun. I mean, Florida, I like that team. I just don't like the backcourt very much. Houston seems to be missing that post presence that they really need to get there. Iowa State, I think they're a really fun team. I think they'll be in the mix as well. Dan Hurley and UConn. Maybe Gonzaga would be my little guy team, but I don't even think that they count as that anymore at this point. So I don't think I can check that box for whatever reason with St. Louis. I like their team. I like Shirts. I think Shirts is going to get another job this offseason, but I'm just, that Dayton game kind of scarred me, Tyler, after I watched it. So I lost a little bit of faith in what they're able to do. So I'll go Duke, Michigan, Arizona, and Kansas. A whole bunch of heavy hitters, and let's see who the best team in the country is. And Indianapolis is a perfect backdrop for that type of situation. And then we remember 2021, right? We had three top seeds, and then UCLA was the miracle run. I feel like that could be a similar formula again, so that might fit into what you're saying. So we have, three top seeds, 1 2 seed, 2 1 seeds, and an 11 seed. Maybe we get something like that again.
38-0 Miami of Ohio potentially.
There you go. That maybe, yeah, that would be fun. Oh my goodness! After all the disrespect that Travis Steele has taken this season, that would be a whole lot of fun. But I'm worried if they lose in the tournament, they're not going to make the tournament. You know what I mean? That's just how crazy of a world we live in right now. So I feel like it would be really tough for them to go undefeated and then into the tournament. But we'll see. I'm excited to see what Steele does.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between thinking will happen and what I want to happen because yeah, that Dayton game exposed a lot of flaws with St. Louis, but it would just be fun to get us a mid-major Cinderella at this given time. So St. Mary's would count, Miami of Ohio, Santa Clara, Utah State, any of those teams kind of fit the bill. Maybe Utah State was the answer, but
Yeah, I'll sign up for Utah State or Santa Clara. Those are two teams. I really like Santa Clara. I think they're a really good team.
But you mentioned Kansas, and that just brings us full circle to the beginning here because if they get there, it means that Darren Peterson took it up a notch. And I want to be proven wrong on this one so badly. Just the proof that this is not like a Ben Simmons, Lonzo Ball. Like I want to see him go out there with a Caleb Wilson like intensity. Like I know Caleb Wilson wants to just go beat the other team by 30 every time he's on the court. So if Darren Peterson erects that attitude in March, Kansas might just win this whole darn thing.
Yeah, I love Council, Trey White, and Badunga, and Tiller. I mean, I love the other four guys that are out there on the floor, and even like El Marco, and the seven that they have is a really good seven. And like you said, if Darren Peterson plays like Darren Peterson has the potential to play, they're a really scary matchup, especially if Kansas is like a 3 seed or something like that. I could see them, making some noise in the tournament. And I do think that like the outside noise is going to motivate Peterson to play at that level because he is not happy with the talk that is happening right now. And I think that's good news for college basketball fans.
Oh yeah, that would be the best if we could get like a Peterson versus Boozer Elite
Hmm.
Eight Final Four national title game. That would be spectacular. But
I'm all in. Sign me up.
you know what else is spectacular? The work that Tate Frazier is doing around the college basketball sphere. Tate, if the good people haven't already found you, where can they do so?
You can find me. I'm guesting with Eamon Brennan, Basket Under Review every week. We're having a lot of fun. Shout out to Trilly Donovan for setting that up. I appreciate him for doing that. ACC Network Basketball Podcast, talking all things ACC. Got a good group of guys that were hitting Terrence Oglesby, Joel Berry, Luke Hancock, Dennis Scott. I mean, the list goes on. We've had a litany of guys on the show, so it's been a lot of fun, getting guests and talking through the league with everybody. So that's been great. And then Ringer Tailgate, if you're a fan of college football, I'm doing that show on the Ringer Network with Van Lathan and Joel Anderson. So whole lot of fun, and man, I can't wait for March.
Yeah, everyone go and follow Tate. March is upon us. He is going to be a more and more important voice as all of those who haven't been paying attention to college basketball rush in to come and join us here in the coming weeks. But Tate, thank you for joining me.
Of course, man. Anytime, just let me know.
A very quick interlude here before we get to Jack Grossman, because there were two important games this week that just deserve a couple of minutes of conversation here. The biggest and one of the most significant games in the ACC, although the TV scheduling late night ACC network would not have told you so. But the kind of game that this league has been lacking over the past couple of years, those mid tier bubble teams just going at it on a late night away from the eyeballs. And Cal beats SMU 73-69 at home. The game of Justin Pippen's career: 24 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. He had a beautiful one step inside the 3 point line, go ahead jumper with a little bit over a minute to go that put Cal in front permanently. He iced the game away with a pair of free throws, which was so critical in this one as SMU shot 11 of 26 from the line themselves. They actually closed really well. It was a hell of a lot worse than that for most of the game. Iga Toglu at 1 of 6, kind of leading the way in that department. But SMU lost BJ Edwards to an injury at halftime. We've yet to get any concrete updates there. Hopefully they have him back soon. But this was the perfect door open for Cal to get the Mustangs without their third best player for the key part of the game when they just kept shooting themselves in the foot. Cal did everything they could to prevent themselves from getting shot in the foot, though. Only 8 turnovers for the game. That was kind of a theme around college basketball on Wednesday. A lot of the biggest games where we saw some surprise results was teams just not turning the ball over. They did overcome an awful Dade Ames game. 2 points. He fouls out about 5 minutes to go. It was Pippen and Bell who saved them. Lee Dort return from injury was huge. He was probably their third best player in that game. But yeah, a weird game, one that they had to win. And you don't apologize for wins at this time of the year because the resume doesn't know the difference at this point. The committee's not going to remember that BJ Edwards was limited in this game. They're not going to remember that SMU couldn't make a foul shot to save their life. What they remember is that Cal got a good win, and they close out here home pit at Wake Forest, at Georgia Tech. Obviously, got to sweep those terrible games. And then right now, they're on pace to play SMU again in the 8-9 game of the ACC tournament. That could very well end up being an NCAA tournament playing game. We'll go deep into bracketology again next week, but SMU's starting to drift towards the bubble. Cal had to get this one last win. They're sitting probably right around the cut line, it seems like, and now they just sit there, hold on for dear life, and hope a couple of teams ahead of them drop. The other big one, the team that we're about to go talk a lot about, Louisville going on the road, losing to North Carolina. No Caleb Wilson for the Tar Heels, obviously. A 3 point game. If you happen to miss it and you're just seeing the box score and that final score, you're not getting the gist of this because Louisville got blown out in the second half in this one. And then North Carolina's end of the game, don't turn the ball over offense got pretty clunky, and the Cardinals were able to fight their way back in it. But just like Pippen on Wednesday, really a career performance from Seth Trimble, 30 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. He was the one who fueled that massive second half run, just three after three after three. And the concerning thing about Louisville in this one, and Jack and I talk about a lot of potential issues for this team, this was not one of them. Mikel Brown Jr., who came out on fire, one of the best 10-minute stretches I've seen from a shooter all season. And that includes some of the spectacular games that Brown has had over the past couple of weeks. But Louisville's defense was awful to start this game, and Ryan Conwell couldn't get it going until late. And early in this game, it really felt like it was just Brown and Javon Hadley trying to keep up in a shootout with the Tar Heels. And you could see Brown kind of start to visibly get frustrated, started to force a lot of shots, force passes, and he kind of got into this weird, just ISO heavy, kind of ball hoggy run of rough decision making. And that's what shot Louisville in the foot in this game. I've used that analogy like 4 times already in this segment, but he was just forcing things. And I think you could tell the body language didn't seem to be there from him. He was frustrated. I don't know if it was with his teammates, with himself, just with the way the game was going in general. And that's where Louisville lost the game. And his numbers end up looking great because he and Conwell were both spectacular at the end where they were trying to charge back. They couldn't close the gap quite in time. But yeah, just another thing to add to this laundry list of Louisville questions. But we're going to get into that momentarily with Jack Grossman. The only other thing to remember, Saturday, 2 massive games, one early in the day, that Duke Virginia showdown that Tate and I just talked about a bunch. And then an odd night game for the ACC weekend that doesn't involve one of the California teams. Virginia Tech is going out to North Carolina. Of course, Carolina just proved in this game that they are still extremely formidable without Caleb Wilson. But for Virginia Tech, that other bubble team for the ACC, there may not be a more beautiful opportunity than to catch a Q1A game with your opponent's best player out. And the committee will think about it a little bit differently than if you'd beaten North Carolina at full strength, but that's a signature win to put atop the resume with that home victory over Virginia. And so that's going to be a huge one for the Hokies, but let's talk Louisville. All right, I am joined by Jack Grossman of Floyd Street's Finest. It is time to dive into the roller coaster that is the 2026 Louisville Cardinals. Jack, thank you for joining me.
Anytime. Roller coaster is a great way of putting it. It's been kind of stop start herky jerky. It's been an interesting season down in Louisville.
I mean, how else do you describe 15th in the country in Ken Palm and 6th in the ACC standings? Like, that dichotomy just doesn't fit. I mean, last year,
Well,
what did 6 get you? Like 80th?
yeah, it's well, one, the ACC is better this year, but not to the point to where those numbers make sense. But it's a combination of they did have Mikel Brown for 4 of their ACC losses. I don't know how much that would have changed things. Or I guess 3 of their ACC losses because one of those games was Tennessee, obviously out of conference. But But I don't know how much he would have changed the impact of all of those games, but that definitely does play a role in it in some way, shape, or form. And also the fact that yes, they're really high in the predictive metrics, but they haven't broken through against the quad 1A type teams yet. I mean, like they got shellacked by Duke a couple times. They lost to Tennessee. They lost at Arkansas. They've they've proven they can beat bad teams. They can beat mid teams. They can beat NCAA tournament teams. We saw the blowout NC State a couple weeks ago. They beat Kentucky early in the season. They split with SMU. So it's really the next couple weeks are going to be very, very telling for Louisville. Maybe not Monday night as much now with Caleb Wilson not playing for North Carolina, but this stretch of at Carolina, at Clemson, at Miami. Three teams that play a style of play that Louisville's really struggled with. They don't want to get up and down as much. They got good front lines. They're going to play physical. Can Louisville stand up to those challenges and win at least two of those three games and get a double bye in the ACC tournament will tell us a lot of can this team be a second weekend team or not come March Madness next month.
Yeah, and just a quick note for the listeners: we are recording this before that Louisville UNC Big
Fair.
Monday game.
Yes.
You won't be hearing it till after this because, quite frankly, where Carolina is right now without Wilson, and the fact that really the nitty gritty that I want to get into with Louisville is not about these next 2, 3 games. It's about what can they do in these games to set them up for those ever important 2 weeks in March. So we kind of just took some time liberties on this one, but yeah, it's really kind of a circle of three here. Louisville and North Carolina both up against Clemson, and that physical front line and what that can do against the Cardinals, not as tough front line, and Carolina without Wilson. And then also quietly, this Clemson team that bracketologists were locking into the field a couple weeks ago, if they drop both of those, they might not be 100% safe anymore. So they kind of just need one of those two wins just to make sure they can breathe easy. Those are the 2 games that really, really fascinate me. But you mentioned Mikel Brown Jr. and what's it look like if he doesn't miss all of those losses. And I think if we had the December, like early January version of Mikel Brown, this guy in his first couple of games against tough competition, maybe it doesn't make a difference. If we have the February version of Mikel Brown Jr., they might win 2, 3, maybe even all 4 of those games. So as he goes into this just epic explosion here, 45 points against NC State, 29 each against Baylor and SMU, 19, he was the leading scorer in a Georgia Tech game that really kind of seemed to not be in doubt like 2 minutes in. What's the difference? What has happened for this guy to go from tantalizing prospect to, oh my God, do we have to extend how many guys we're talking about at the top of the draft again?
I mean, to be fair, early in the season, he was averaging close to 20 points per game. I know he wasn't shooting the three ball as well as he is now, but he had a huge game against Kentucky early on in the season. He also, even though they lost the Arkansas game, played pretty well in that game, was kind of trying to single-handedly drag them back. So he was not at the level he's at right now, but he was playing good basketball before the injury. And I think it just kind of took him some time to get a rhythm down again, to get back in the flow of things, to do adjust, because it had been about 5-6 weeks since he had played. That takes some time for some guys. So I think that's really what it was more than anything else when he first came back. But also you look at it like how many of these games was Louisville going to win that he was out for? I mean, they lost at Tennessee, but the issue in that game wasn't guard play. Woolley and Conwell both had over 20 on pretty good shooting numbers in that game. The issue was defensively in the front line. That's kind of a common theme here. Duke's just
we'll get to that.
Duke is Duke. So like, fine, whatever. Maybe the Stanford game, maybe Virginia, who was playing good ball there, but you can go either way on those. But for me, in late December or early mid-January, Louisville fans had this big outcry about the offense of, oh my God, this doesn't work against good teams, all that stuff. I'm like, guys, you're missing a top 5, top 10 pick. That's gonna have ramifications offensively. You're not going to be as good on that end of the floor. So for me, it fixed a lot of Louisville's issues on the offensive end. Mikel Brown coming back and getting into this rhythm, and obviously it doesn't it's not rocket science to say if you have a guy that can go for 45 points and then 30 points and then 29, whatever it was when he's done the last 4 games, it's going to help the offense. But it takes guys like Isaac McNeely. It slides him down from being maybe second or third on the depth chart to fourth on the depth chart, to where you can't put resources to trying to slow him down, take away what he does at his best, which is, catch and shoot, knock down threes. I mean, he shot only 31% from three when Mikel Brown was out, and he's up over 45% when Mikel Brown plays. Like, there's a very clear difference there. Mikel Brown brings so much more gravity to him. The defense is forced to focus on him so much because he can beat you in so many different ways that it opens up 3-point attempts for McNeely. It opens up driving lanes for Conwell and Woolley. It opens up Javon Hadley's game and kind of the short posts and that stuff. It opens up Sinatra Frew as a role man in ways that just makes everyone else's life so much easier when the defense has to focus on a dude that is probably going to be a top 10, maybe a top 5 pick come next month. The issue is, and this is going back to the Stanford game and the first Duke game especially, was Mikel Brown, as fantastic as he is, not a great defender at this stage in his career. And for Louisville, this goes hand in hand with the front court as well. This is something that shameless plug, Mark Lieberman and I talked about on my podcast, Floyd Creed's Finest.
Jack, I was going to plug this
but
exact part of the discussion. Come on, man.
Fair.
It's in the notes.
Yeah, shameless plug on my end, but something that we've talked about extensively all season, but it's kind of resurfaced itself during Louisville's last 2 games against SMU, where they give up 46 points in the paint, then same thing against Georgia Tech in a win, is Brown is not a guy at this stage. He struggles off ball, but also Louisville as a whole really, really struggles staying in front of the basketball on the perimeter. So for as much struggles as there is in the front court, Louisville's undersized, all that stuff, for me, a lot of their issues on the defensive end comes from their perimeter defense not being what it was a year ago when you had Chucky Hepburn, who was arguably the best perimeter defender in college basketball, and a dude in Terrence Edwards, who was very underrated in that aspect as well. So when you can't keep guys out of the lane, and then you don't have shot blockers, because Frew's not a shot blocker, Hadley's not a shot blocker, Khalifa sure as hell, as much as I like him offensively, he's not a shot blocker. Kenai Ruse, Pryor, those guys aren't blocking shots. You don't have anyone, you don't have Gorgie Jang or Montrezl Harrell for throwbacks for Louisville for back in the day, or you're a pick guy. DeJuan Blair's not back there fixing everyone's mistakes. When you get beat off the dribble, you don't have rim protection to clean up the mess. Louisville's not a good defensive rotating team, so you're going to give up a lot of layups and 3-pointers, which when you give up 95 points to SMU, 1.31 points per possession, and give up scores on 59% of possessions, SMU's a very good offensive team, don't get me wrong, but Louisville made that incredibly easy for SMU. And Georgia Tech, who's a team, I live down in Atlanta now, I saw them play Virginia on Wednesday, one of the sadder games I've seen in my life, to be completely honest. That Georgia Tech team was putrid, to be honest. But to give up 70 points and 2 different 12-0 runs to that Georgia Tech team and 46 points in the paint to that Georgia Tech team, that means they're not defending at the level still that they need to be to make a run deep in March, to where basically it comes down to now is, can the offense just carry them to a couple wins, is really what I think it's at this point.
So Louisville owns 2 of kind of the most confusing eye test versus actual statistical differentials that I can remember in a while in college basketball. The first one of those is you go pull up the KenPom page, and first of all, the defensive category just filled with all of this beautiful green. They're 28th in the country. I don't know how that's true, but most specifically, 28th in the country in opponent 2-point percentage. And it's so much because this Louisville defense strategically just forces opponents to take more threes than layups. And they are good at funneling guys into taking more mid-ranges than they should. But like top 30 in the nation, it seems, wow, great. What wonderful interior defense they have. Their interior defense stinks. It's honestly, like, I get a little mad just looking at the stat. Like, I feel like someone went in and fudged the numbers there.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is honestly due to there's 2 things going on. One, Louisville, when they played Cupcakes, they absolutely smothered them with their athleticism and all that stuff. So I'll give you a comparison. So Kentucky actually, when they were 7-4 early in the season, and the sky was falling, and they wanted to fire Mark Pope. Pope said he wanted to kill himself in a press conference, all that stuff. After they lost to Gonzaga by a million points, they were better metrically during that stretch than they were during the following 14 games when they won 11 out of 14 and 8 out of 9. Obviously, they've come back to earth a little bit. But the reason that was because they were running up the score so much against some of the, low major teams they were playing. It was kind of fudging the efficiency numbers. And I think honestly that's a big part of it for Louisville. Because in the ACC, they're still a top 5 defense statistically in the ACC, and efficiency wise, but it's still a big step behind from where they were in the non-conference, and that's because you're playing much better teams day in day out in the ACC. But the other thing that happens is when you play the tempo Louisville wants to play at, you get more possessions, you give up more possessions. The Ken Pom seems to like, and Torvik at all these sites seem to like it when you play faster. That seems to go into inflates your stats a little bit as well. I feel like, especially on the offensive end, but defensively as well, because you can give up 70 points to Georgia Tech, but if it's in a 73 possession game, that's going to look a lot better than if you give up 70 in a 64 possession game for whatever it's worth. It's not a great answer, but those are the two things that I can come up with, because you watch them on the eye test and you watch them against legit teams. I wonder, well, you do. I can pull this up on Torvik. I wonder what their defensive efficiency is against like top 25 opponents or top 50 opponents. We'll see if I can get that to work for me here real quick, because I think that would give us a better indication. So they're 50th defensively when they're facing a top 50 team. So a little bit worse there on that point, if that helps at all. So I don't have a great answer for you. I just know when you watch it on the eye test, it doesn't look like a top 30 defense nationally.
Yeah, and I mean, all of their efficiency numbers across the board are worse in ACC play compared to the non-con, which makes sense. I mean, you even referenced those Mikel Brown Jr. performances early in the year. And I still think back to those South Carolina State and Jackson State games where, I mean, terrible competition,
Right.
but this Louisville team looked like they could play together for 4 years and go 160 and 0 and win 4 national championships. Like, that's how great that looked in some of those games. But you are far more qualified to answer a question that I have asked myself so many times over the last couple of weeks. Why does Kason Pryor not just play more? He was awesome when he finally got in the Notre
Because he
Dame
hasn't
game.
been good. He hasn't been good. That's why he doesn't play more.
He's only played one. He's basically only played once in like the last 3 months, and I thought he was good in the Notre Dame game. So
I mean, he was on the court for both the 12-0 runs that Georgia Tech had on Saturday. If that makes it feel any better. I mean, Kason Pryor in theory helps this team a lot because he's before the injury, anyways, athletic. He's long. He's aggressive. He's a good rebounder. But he's a black hole on the offensive end. He has terrible shot selection. And two, he just hasn't been the same guy athletically since the injury. Like it hasn't clicked for him outside of that brief moment in the Notre Dame game and the Memphis game earlier that year. I think he has those two games I think are like 60% of the points he has all season or something silly like that. He doesn't shoot the ball well, but he takes he takes shots anyways. He just doesn't have that same type of burst that he had before the injury last year. He just hasn't been good, to be honest. He's pretty unplayable against anyone that has a pulse. to put it mildly, I think is the best way to put it. I think the bigger question for them, because they put all their eggs in the basket of Pryor, but also Kenai Roos, of we're going to expect Pryor to come back from the injury and be the same type of impact defensively that he was a year ago before he got hurt. And Kenai Roos is going to take the freshman to sophomore year jump. And Roos has taken a jump. He has. Don't get me wrong. To where against bad competition, he can put up some numbers. He can be pretty good. But outside the SMU game, which SMU's also a putrid defensive team, the first SMU game that is at home where they won, where he had either double double or close to it. When they play good teams, he doesn't give you reasons to keep him on the floor. The pros have not shined enough to outweigh the cons, and I think that's true for both Roos and Pryor to differing degrees. And what that has done is, I mean, you look at Louisville's last three games. Yeah, no points against SMU, no points against Baylor, three against Georgia Tech, only a couple rebounds in each of those games. He's just not producing. And you can't have a dude on there with the way Louisville plays offense. If you're going to have a non-shooter on the floor, with Roos and Pryor both are, you need that to come through on the defensive end, and it just hasn't consistently enough. And they haven't contributed in other ways to keep them on the floor. So what that does, it really handcuffs Louisville. Because Javon Hadley's a really, really good player, but he's a 6'5", 6'6" dude trying to play the four against Cam Boozer. That doesn't work either. And if Caleb Wilson was playing Monday night, having Hadley try to guard Caleb Wilson, that's not great. That's not setting you up for success. And you can't play Fru and Khalifa together because
Oh my God, that would be slow.
exactly. And you don't trust either one of those guys to be guarding four men either. And Zugris gives really good effort. He hustles, but he's just not developed enough as a basketball player at this stage of his career to where you can give him legit minutes on a team that's trying to be a second weekend NCAA tournament team. So it really comes down to the miscalculation of what Pryor and Roos were going to be this season. That's handcuffed Pat Kelsey and stripped him of all the versatility and lineup flexibility that he thought and we thought and I thought that everyone thought he was going to have this season.
Yeah, I mean, Ruth's it's at least a little bit different because he has had his moments, and you think back to
And
like,
I think Roos will get there eventually. Just we're sitting here on February 23rd at this point. I don't think it's going to be this season at this stage.
yeah, I mean, you might be able to steal a game or two, like that SMU game, the one that they won at the end of January, where Ruth's may have been the most impactful player for Louisville in that game, and he just gives them an extra verticality and athleticism that the rest of these guys don't have. Like Khalifa, both of us can probably jump higher than Ali Khalifa, but the prior thing, just I know there's a lot of reasons not to do it, but I'm watching the second SMU game, the loss from last week, as Sinandra Fru is just getting shoved under the basket by Igatoglu again. And then Igatoglu's getting an offensive board and another offensive board and a third offensive board. And I'm just thinking, man, I know it probably will go wrong if they put Pryor in, but we know it's going wrong with Fru in there. And it just felt like it was worth the wild card.
I mean, Pryor when he's on the floor is taking shots on 21% of the possessions he's in.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That's why he's not in the game more. like all the defensive stuff and all that. He hasn't been as good defensively as he was last year. But the core issue is when he's on the court, he's the fifth guy that you want taking shots, and he's taking shots at a rate. I got the KenPom page pulled up right now. He's taking shots more often than Javon Hadley, Fru, Woolley, Roos, Khalifa, Zugris. He's taking more shots than anyone not named Brown and Conwell. You can't have that. And that was always going to be a big question for me was could Case and Pryor accept the role offensively of being a guy that you can't be Carmelo Anthony jab stepping from the elbow. Which, let's be honest, when he played last season before he got hurt, that's what he was when he had the ball. He was a black hole when he gets the ball, and he still is this year. And could you be a guy that would accept playing in the dunker spot, being a lob threat, setting screens, getting offensive rebounds, which he's only getting offensive rebounds on 5% of misses when he's in the game either. That's also pretty putrid for a guy that's supposed to be your best rebounder. And can you do all the dirty work? And Case and Pryor, in limited minutes, but still limited minutes, has kind of shown you pretty emphatically he's not willing to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, I'm sorry, you can't be on the floor and think it's all about you offensively. We have Mikel Brown, Ryan Cobwell on the court. You just can't.
So the other guy we've kind of just not really touched on, and this is the other deceiving stat. You watch Isaac McNeely out there, and you have been all over this. McNeely is terrible when Mikel Brown Jr. is not out there stat that continues to ring more and more true as Brown comes back. And McNeely has that 3 for 3 game over the weekend. Or sorry, Yeah, 3 for 3 from three. And he's shooting over 40% from three, which just watching throughout the games, I would have guessed it was so much worse than that. And it's just all of those games where even when he's playing badly, he can find a way to cobble together that 2 for 7 instead of the 0 for 7. But do we have just an Isaac McNeely explosion game at some point this year? Because this was a guy that felt like he could shoot 50% in this offense. And you look at some of the other suffering shooters from last year's Virginia team. Data Ames and Ishan Sharma are both thriving in new places. And Isaac McNeely, it does feel like he has taken a little bit of a step back, but could we still see in a biggest moment a holy hell Isaac McNeely just went 7 for 9 from three type of performance?
I mean, we always could. I mean, he's that type of shooter. It's possible. I mean, Rain Smith had a few games like that last year. I mean, he had the game at SMU where he hit 10 threes. But I think what it comes down to is Louisville doesn't rely on McNeely this year the same way they had to with Rain Smith last year, to where McNeely is he's like the fourth option offensively. I mean, it's Mikel Brown. It's what you're doing with Mikel Brown. It's Codwell getting downhill. It's Frew on rolls. And then it's probably McNeely. Which there's nothing wrong with that. I think he's on the team to be a 3 and D guy. And every once in a while you'll have Klay Thompson, the ultimate 3 and D guy, will go off and explode. But he's a complimentary piece. He's not a feature. So yes, it could definitely happen. But I think it's just more of a product of him having a hot night, and also just defenses forgetting about him isn't the right word for it, but it kind of has to organically happen. I don't think it's something that Louisville's going to try to force to happen. I know people have been very critical of McNeely defensively also, which he's fine on that end. I think he's kind of been the scapegoat for the things we were talking about earlier, with the fact that the entire perimeter defense is just awful, and people can't get the fact that Ada Ment torched him for 25, 30, whatever it was, and that was just a terrible matchup. So all the other issues that Louisville has, whether it be not being able to stop the ball, or the fact that because Roots and Pryor haven't been the guys you were hoping they would be, you can't slide Hadley down to guard an Ada Ment in that game. It's kind of scapegoated McNeely to make it seem like a lot worse than it really is. Plus the fact that, again, Mikel Brown was gone for 6 weeks and he didn't shoot the ball nearly as well without the top 10 pick. Whoever would have thought that would be possible?
So the other guy in the backcourt, though, Ryan Cottonwell, who had a couple of massive games when Brown was out on just super dominant possessing of the ball from him. Really, just throughout this year, it's basically Kentucky, Pitt, and NC State, probably the only three games where Conwell has had just a masterful star level performance
Indiana too.
on great efficiency. Yeah, India outthrowing the Indiana game as well. I mean, that one was just.
A
I
shellacking.
I still can't believe they only won by 9 in that game. Like it felt like they were going to win by 40
So
at
so so I
halftime.
so I was at that game, and my brother had bet Louisville minus 9.5,
Oh
and
God.
combined with the over. So we're leaving and to go because it was the same day as the Big Ten title game in football. Also, Indiana was playing Ohio State, so we were doing both of them, and we're leaving the games. The game's full on decided, and we get to the main concourse at Gainbridge to walk down and go find a bar, or whatever. My brother goes, "Wait, hold on, they need 5 more points for this over," and there's a minute and a half. I was like, "All right, let's go watch it." So Indiana's hitting some free throws and stuff like that. I turned to him, I go, your over's gonna be fine. You might need to start sweating that night. And he was he was livid when Indiana backdoor covered that. It was pretty great. It was funny, but yeah, just complete side story, unrelated to anything else.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I was at Virginia and Dayton that day, and I was watching it on my phone, walking back from the arena, like trying to hustle back to the hotel and get on the big screen. And it was late first half. And by the time I get back, I'm like, what the hell was I rushing over here for?
yeah,
Louisville
well,
just killed this team.
yeah, Louisville jumped out 16-0, and it was never a contest. It
Yeah.
really wasn't. But I mean Conwell's a damn good player. I mean he's been kind of who we thought he would be. He's an all ACC caliber player that has some explosions, and I know he was in a little bit of a shooting slump there for a little bit after Brown came back, but he has such a proven track record throughout his career. Like he's fine. I have no qualms with Ryan Codwell. To be honest, he's been what Louisville has expected and asked him to be this year. I will say defensively, I think they were expecting a little bit more, but on the offensive end, and that he's been who they thought they were. When Brown was out, they put a lot of pressure on him on both ends of the
Mhm.
floor because he's the guy that they've tried to have play that Chucky Hepburn role from last year of we want you initializing our ball pressure, picking guys up 94 feet, and then all all the load that was on him offensively also I think wore him down a little bit over time, which is why I think the numbers went down for a bit when Brown was out at the end and maybe took it a little bit for him to kind of get his legs back underneath him. But he's fine. He's a really good player. Need a little bit more out of him defensively, but offensively no issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically about that Stanford game where he is an on paper awful 6 for 21 performance, but if you were watching that game, you're just sitting there just going, okay, what else did they do? I think that was the game where they were really
Well, I mean, you
good
gave up
every
30.
Ali Khalifa minute and terrible the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, the issue of that game was you gave up 30 to a Corey.
Oh
You couldn't
yeah.
keep him out of the lane. Like that was the ball game right there. Just like the first Duke game, Caleb Foster hadn't scored more than 16 points in a full game at any point all year. Then he scores 17 in the second half. Or like SMU, you couldn't keep Boopy Miller, Pierre, those guys out of the lane in the second game. I mean, it's a very common theme here for Louisville. With guards that can break you down one on one. It's not a coincidence that the games they've looked their best in, NC State doesn't really have a guy at that level that can do that. Indiana sure as hell doesn't have a guy that can do that. Kentucky doesn't have a guy that can do that. When Louisville is going to be as matchup dependent as anyone when it comes to the NCAA tournament. They'll go as far as they can until they run into a good guard that can break you down off the dribble or a really good front line. That's kind of where they're at right now.
So that's where I want to close this out. And one of the great things about college basketball, if you're one of the many awesome but flawed teams in this sport, is that everyone has two or three weaknesses, and you rarely find a team that can exploit all of them. And who knows, Louisville may get a draw first, second, Sweet 16, the NCAA tournament where they don't run into any of those teams. And all of a sudden they're playing track meets and comfortably winning games 90 to 80. But I think we do get one fun chance to gauge this one last time, and that's the last game of the season against Miami, who absolutely can exploit both with Malik Reneau and Trey Donaldson. So I know it's far in advance. You probably have not started to put together your scouting report
I've
yet, but
thought about that game a
yeah,
lot actually because of
what
that.
what would you like to see in that one that makes you feel really good about this Louisville defense going into the ACC tournament, feeling
I
like they
mean,
they have improved here at the end?
you want to see them be competitive on the glass, keep Donaldson out of the lane, and Malik Reneau is a dude that I'm an Indiana grad, so I've watched a lot of Malik Reneau basketball in my time, and he is as good as it comes in the sport of getting on that right block, getting to his left hand, and being really good at finishing around the rim. So I think honestly, without Caleb Wilson, I think they do beat North Carolina. I know they have Vasar back, but Carolina doesn't have the type of guard play unless Seth Trimble just goes off to give them a whole lot of issues. I mean, Dixon's been hit or miss, so on and so forth. Clemson just kind of seems like they're in a free fall right now. That Miami game's the one I'm really pointing to of can you prove that you can hang in a half court slugfest against a really good front line with not just Renew but Uday as well. Because at this point, I've kind of given up that you're going to get a bunch out of Roots or Pryor. Like I just don't expect it at this stage. We have just a full season's worth of evidence of the contrary at this point. But can you get something? Maybe I guess out of Roots, but can you not get mauled in the paint by Renew? Can you keep Donaldson out of the lane? And can you stand up to that physicality and look like you belong in the game physically? Because Louisville, when they played Tennessee, when they played Duke, even that Stanford game, when they play really big physical teams, they don't look like they belong on the court so far this year. Kid, that's your last dress rehearsal, your last litmus test to kind of prove that yes, we have grown, we've toughened up, and we're ready for that type of battle come ACC tournament in a few weeks and the NCAA tournament after that.
Yeah, and that feels like the kind of game where you're just gonna have to toss Ruths out there early and hope that it's one of his good games because Javon
I
Hadley
mean, but like
gonna
with
struggle with
Bruce,
Reynu.
right, right. But like with Bruce, yes, he had the good game against SMU at home, but SMU isn't exactly like that's not
Yeah,
the type of team they've
Corey
struggled.
Washington
Yeah,
is not Malik Reynu.
exactly. And when you look at him against even Kentucky, a game that they won, or Tennessee, or hell, even Indiana who has a putrid front line, or the Duke games, he hasn't performed against top 25, top 30 competition against those front lines. So for me, it's the definition of an insanity to keep trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And with Kenai Roos, we have the track record now for this season of he hasn't done it. So maybe he proves me wrong. I hope he does. But for me, I think sitting here this late in the season, I think it's unrealistic to come out and expect Kenai Roos, who's been bullied every time they've played someone worth a damn all year on the inside, to come up and suddenly just shut down Malik Renew. I just don't think it's realistic.
Well, hey, that is the magic of college basketball
Yeah.
because I mean Louisville is far from the only team that has certain spots where it's hey, we got this bad solution, another bad solution, and a terrible solution. So we might as well try
I
bad
think
solution number two again and see if it improves.
I think the theory is you play Hadley at the four. You know you're going to give up stuff, but the hope is that you're able to outweigh that with your shooting and what you do on the offensive end. I think is the hope at this point because that's kind of their only way to win. The only other thing I'd add is they got to stop turning the ball over. 18 turnovers at SMU, 17 against Pitt. If you're turning the ball over 25% of your possessions with how narrow of a margin Louisville has defensively, the fact they have to win games with their offense, got to be a little bit more you got to prioritize taking care of the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean they could have turned the ball over 40 times that pick game. They would have won
Yeah.
comfortably, but
Yeah.
has been an issue. Jack, you're over at Floyd Street's Finest. You and Coach Lieberman are breaking down the ins and outs of Louisville and of the Kentucky deli scene. Where can all the good people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Jack Grossman 97, tweeting Louisville, Indiana, college basketball nonsense. Just having a lot of fun over there. Follow us on Twitter or follow me on Twitter at Jack Grossman 97. Follow the podcast, Floyd Street's Finest, part of the Field 68 Podcast Network. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Follow us there, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Um, we are wherever you listen to a podcast or consume that type of content.
All right, everyone, go give Jack a follow, listen to the show, and thank you for joining me.